Okay, my iPad went down there for some reason, but where we were, I was saying about this handle hold down nut. I always just do it finger tight. Remove the handle, unscrew the star drag. It just screws off. Take out these two hold down screws. The right side end plate, if you push down on that, it'll come right off. Just set that to the side for now. It's called the dog gear. That's what keeps the handle from rotating backwards. It's got notches on the bottom of this main gear assembly here. It's real simple design. When it starts to rotate back, it notches into these little grooves right here and keeps it from rotating back. Set that to the side. This one's it's pretty smooth, but you can take the gear out. This is called the Pinion Gear. Make sure it's not chipped up or anything. They last forever. It's a brass gear. Got a little grease in there. Just slide it back in the yoke. But if you needed to, you could pack it with grease or whatever. But I find it doesn't take a whole heck of a lot. You can actually lift up on some of these plates and get some grease in there up underneath so it slides. But this one's already greased. It doesn't need any. I'm just kind of showing you the process. But anyway, up under these washers and under this clicker, this is a drag clicker. That's why they call it clicker. Are your actual drag washers. You just slide this off. It's got one here, and it's got one on the bottom side, right in there if you can see it. Just make sure they got a little, believe it or not, grease on them. I use cow's real grease. It doesn't take a whole lot, but they need to be able to slide freely, just like that's doing. I'm pulling down on the main gear and it's sliding on the drag washers. They're just a fiber washer, but it's important to keep a little bit of grease on there just to allow them to slide free, so you don't have a real jerky drag. You know, it'll be smooth. Just put the wave washer back on. Really not much to cleaning this. You can run some sandpaper down inside it, make it smooth so it operates smooth on this brake. It's called a brake plate. Make sure the dog gear gets back in place. You just rotate, hold it down. It's got two little ears. You have to separate them a little bit, then roll the gear forward. It'll drop right into place, and you can see how it works. It keeps it from spinning backwards. It'll spin forward but not back. And it's really not much to that. You can put a little grease on the shaft there if you want to, but I tend to use very, very little grease. Let's put it back together. Kind of snaps in place. You can put the 2 screws back in at this point and kind of keep everything from falling apart. It doesn't have to be real tight. That's one of the reasons I use a small watch screwdriver, because it's kind of like a torque screwdriver. It doesn't let you get them real tight. They don't need to be that tight. Just snug. It's not going anywhere. Make sure it operates okay. There's a spool release button. While you're greasing up underneath here on this side of the brake plate, put a little grease on that. But again, doesn't take much at all. We'll go ahead and take the end cap off. There's the little flat bearing or shim. It's a spool centering shim. The spool shaft itself rides on this 3.175 millimeter by 3 by 10 millimeter brass bushing. This bushing is 60 years old, so they don't take much maintenance at all. I mean, you can't wear them out. It just drops back in there. Just make sure there's not any old dry, brittle or hard grease. If there is, get it out. All it'll do is slow the spool down. The spool just comes through here and it just rides on this brass bushing. You can put bearings in these actually, but I find that the brass bushing gives you, in my opinion anyway, gives you a lot more direct feel. It sounds stupid, but you just have to try it with the bearing and then with the bushing. But just this tried and true brass bushing, I never change it unless I'm just trying to make one cast as far as I can. I'm not really interested in that. More interested in durability. Again, you make sure your brake blocks are where they'll slide inside the brake drum. It just slides through the center of the pinion gear here. Everything just kind of snaps into place. I'll rotate it and it'll just fall into place usually. You can snug the end cap screws down. Now, of course, if this one was dirty, it would take quite a bit longer, but it's not dirty at all. So I'm just kind of showing you the process, what it takes. It's not much to it. Once you do one or two, most people have this is probably the hardest part, getting the star drag started back on the shaft here. But I find if you'll, just like any bolt and nut, if you'll just hold it on there, rotate it backwards counterclockwise until you hear it click like that. Well, until you hear it click. Let's try one more time. Get the threads lined up. I heard it click, and then just rotate it forward. One more time. There we go. Once it starts, come on down past the handle stop shoulder and place the handle. The handle screw again, finger tight. I don't put it any tighter than that. For one reason, the main gear shaft rides on the underside of this screw, and you can tighten it down far enough to where it binds. So I just, once it hits, I stop. That's it. I've never had one back off. All it does anyway is keep the handle from sliding off the end. Unless your handle's out here and you're rotating it backwards, which is impossible, really. it's not going anywhere. You're constantly rotating it forward. It's just staying, it's snugging itself down basically as you reel. Again, reel back, turn backwards a little bit till you hear it click, then roll it forward. I'll take a 10mm and just barely snug it down. It doesn't have to be tight at all because it's kind of self-tightening. Take your end cap, make sure they're clean. If they were dry, you could put a drop of oil in there because, like I said, the end of the spool shaft rides directly on that, and that's what tensions your spool to keep it from overrunning or causing a major backlash. And on the right side end cap, on the right side plate, this side with the handle, always just go ahead and snug it all the way down to where it seats. You want to have some free play. Of course, it'll vary depending on the weight of your lure, but you want to have a little bit of end play here, or you won't get a whole lot of spin out of your spool. You can use the tension cap to completely stop the spool to where there's no, being if you had a super heavy lure, that's where, you know, you'd use it in that area. But I'll just back it off the left end cap to where get a little movement, and you can tighten it up accordingly to the weight of your lure. Tighter if it's, you know, a light lure. If it's a heavy lure, you don't want the spool to overrun, so you'll snug this down to where it's harder to turn. Otherwise, it'll just fly uncontrollably. It'll spin bird nest every time. So, but you know, it's not too bad getting one tuned. Once you get it on a rod and get the lure on it, you'll just push the button, let it drop, and when it hits the floor, it shouldn't keep going. It should just pretty much stop, and you just adjust this tension knob here until you get it to that point to where it doesn't overrun. And that's about it. That's about all there is to it. I always try to leave my drag, if you're not going to use them for a while, I'll leave my drag loose just to not compress the washers and keep them in a compressed state. And when you go fishing, you can snug them down a little bit until they get to the point to where you need it. But I'll leave mine backed off just to relieve the tension. That's it. That's as simple as it is. There's not a lot more to cleaning one. Some of the older ones in the 50s, they'll have an oil hole on the end cap, on both end caps, and even up through 62 they had an oil hole in the handle nut. You can oil directly into here, and if it had the oil holes, of course you could just oil a squirt of oil in there. But again, I use very little oil, hardly any at all, matter of fact. And but that's about it. This was part 2. Like I said, for some reason my iPad just clicked off, but we finished it. And hope y'all have a good night. Maybe this might help somebody.